I'm at Blackden Brook in the High Peak, just off the eastern end of Snake Road, the A57, on what was supposed to be a sunny day right across the northwest of England. As you may note behind me, the Kinder Plateau seems to have other ideas. Blackden Brook always makes the list of must-do Peak District scrambles. It's got several waterfalls, it's got a steep, very steep, potentially final scramble, got options for more difficult exit routes at the end, but I was a little bit underwhelmed by its neighbour Fairbrook, so I'm looking forward to seeing whether it lives up to its billing. Here's the obvious start point for the scramble, small waterfall underneath that alder tree. Just beyond its 3-foot cousin, here's a 10-foot or so waterfall, sub-grade one, a little tricky to get up to because here we've got a nice plunge and dip pool about 5 feet deep, but if you go up on the left-hand side to get started, and then you can just go up the centre fairly easily. The profile of Blackden Brook is very similar to its neighbour Fairbrook. So you've got a large first part that is just a shallow, steady incline. Difference being compared to Fairbrook is that other than those 1.5 waterfalls to begin with, so far there's been nothing else, whereas Fairbrook has a number of waterfalls that you can go up in the first part. So there's nothing really worth bothering about other than those first two. Luckily, there are paths, for example, you can see here off to the right, the path sometimes on the right, sometimes on the left, sometimes both, fairly easy to get up to get towards the more interesting elements of Blackden Brook. Now about halfway up the first section of the brook, there's a 4 to 5 foot dip pool, a 3 to 4 foot mossy fall to climb. A little bit further on, here's another one, but with the dimensions reversed. 3-4 foot dip pool, 4-5 foot waterfall. The path rises above the brook to the right. If you like hidden away mossy little cascades, you can stay in the stream for this part. I mentioned exit routes, and just before the second marked waterfall on the main brook, off to the left, here's a quick treat, which is a greasy grade 1, I won't call it a waterfall scramble because it's more of a dribble than a waterfall given we haven't had much rain recently. Useful tree root on the right to help you get up, and above it another 0.5 grade dribble, and then you have to go off to the left to find your way back down to the main brook. And here is that second main waterfall, a fantastic grade 1 scramble. Somewhat scary, a little bit slippery, around about 25 feet in total, and I did pop a climbing helmet on to get up it. The route I took was up to here, get onto that ledge, then onto that ledge, and then all the way up to the top. Only hint I'd give is that that ledge there, if you reach over it, there's a nice little handhold for it that can help pull you up. And if you think that's scary, the path off to the right above the brook I felt was even worse, because it is got a big drop beneath it and it's quite eroded beneath your feet in a number of places. So honestly, in preference, I think I would probably climb the waterfall rather than the path. Second time up the waterfall, I did slip a couple of times. Luckily managed to stop myself slithering all the way down, but a note that it does need a bit of care. Above the waterfall, a couple of side dip pools, one here just below this small cascade. I'm going to take this fence as a kind of marker that we're starting to go towards the steeper business end of the brook. Getting a little closer to the plateau, the sides of the clough are closing in a little. Looks absolutely beautiful with the heather and the sunshine that's now come out. Should just mention the conditions, that it's not rained a lot, so water levels are quite low. The surface for walking over, not bad. Reasonable amount of grip and moss on some of the bits here where it's starting to become a bit more of a clamber. I'm swapping in and out of the brook at the moment. Here's the path that runs alongside, using that for some sections. Here's an example of a swap in, a series of mossy steps. This is the beginning of the final section, relatively little water in the brook, so it's going to be a mix of a few mossy cascades and clambering over and around large boulders. You can see the main route up onto the top of the plateau going up there, but to my left now is the first of the two main escape routes that you can take. Pretty easy in the first section, but the final element up there is rated at around a grade 3 scramble. So only for those who fancy scrambling at that grade, but there will be another one further up. Now up to my left is the second main escape route, and I've got to say, looking at it, it does look to be a bit more interesting than what's coming up over here on the main part of the brook's ascent to the plateau. And here's the final stretch before the top. So far, for this final steep bit, it's really been more clambering rather than actual scrambling, I'd say. Only at this very last part before the plateau is something I might call scrambling. Can't call it a rock wall, it's just a kind of 10-foot very easy scramble. The rest of it has just been clambering over boulders. As the doors would say, this is the end. The Kinder exclusion fence and the perimeter path for the Kinder Plateau. And if you're lucky, and it's a nice day as today has turned out to be, some glorious views over to Derwent Howden and beyond even. Because of that absence of wow factor with the final bit of the brook, I've climbed back down to try the second, and it's the easier of the two main escape routes that I identified earlier, which begins with boulders, boulders and more boulders. This exit route is definitely better than the main brook. I say brook, but neither there nor here is there actually any water, and it's still not really what I would regard as scrambling. It's what I call that halfway house between scrambling and clambering, that is sclambering. The rocks are a mix of algae covered and not, but even the algae covered ones are not too slippery. Some in places, so you do have to take a little bit of care. Here's the final part of the exit route, and just as on the main brook, it's morphing to a little bit of an actual scramble. Okay, so overall, what's the verdict on Blackden Brook? Well, the main waterfall was fantastic. It's a grade 1 plus 1.5. I really enjoyed going up it, real sense of achievement to have managed it. But unfortunately it rather stands on its own, because the first waterfall was just okay, then there's a whole lot essentially of nothing very much until you get to the very final steep section where I wouldn't go up the main brook, I would take the exit route that I've done. But again, is that anything more than just okay? I don't know whether it's because I'm doing more scrambles that my tolerance for mediocre scrambles is being reduced, but I don't rate it that highly. It's certainly not a must-do scramble, enjoyable enough if you happen to be in the area, but I'm only going to rate it, I guess, you know, that main waterfall 7.5 or 8, you give it a rating, but for the scramble itself, only something like 6 out of 10. To close, here's an overview map. Blue for the walk-in from the lay-by on the A57, across the River Ashop and past Blackden Barn to the first small waterfall. Red for the scramble, though, as I noted, you would only get into the brook for the main and side waterfalls, perhaps a few cascades before the final plateau scramble, and then blue again to walk the path back down to Snake Road. Further details are given in the text description underneath the video.